I arrived at Princeton on a sweltering morning in early June, not out of excitement, but to confirm one thing. Would they really go through with it? The main lawn was bathed in golden sunlight, tree shadows stretching over the rows of family seating. Students in black robes trimmed with vivid orange and gold moved like bees through a hive of celebration. Parents clutched bouquets, gift bags, and glossy programs. I held nothing, just a growing sense of dread. I spotted them from afar, my mother, Veronica, in a pale beige linen dress with her signature tightly styled hair. My father, Dennis, stood tall, adjusting his shirt collar and gripping his phone like it mattered more than the ceremony itself. Between them was Olivia, my younger sister, radiant in her honor cords and a sash embroidered with Summa Cum Laude. They didn't recognize me right away. When my mother's gaze finally landed on me, she froze briefly, then forced a smile, like she was trying to place someone she vaguely remembered from her country club. "Athena," she said softly, "neither warm nor cold. You came too?" "I received an invitation," I replied, trying to keep my tone level. She let out a quiet, dismissive laugh. "You probably saw a forwarded copy. The official guest list didn't include your name." My father said nothing. He glanced at his watch, then looked away. Olivia leaned in for a brief hug, awkward, like greeting an old acquaintance at an airport, her eyes flicking sideways, clearly waiting for our mother's approval before showing too much warmth. "I'm glad you're here," Olivia whispered. I gave a small smile but said nothing. My eyes drifted to the seating chart posted near the main ceremony arch. The Harper family was printed in bold at the top. Dennis, Veronica, Olivia, plus 3 guests. I stared for a long time, but my name wasn't there. A volunteer approached and handed me a name tag. White, no logo, no crest, just the word guest, printed in emotionless Times New Roman. I looked at the tag for a long moment. 20 years ago, I helped design our original family crest for a reunion. My mother and I spent a week picking fonts and symbols, and now here I was, at Princeton. No more than a stranger at someone else's graduation. I should have walked away. That would have been the sensible, self-respecting thing to do. But instead, I clipped the badge to my blazer and walked toward the seating tent like a ghost arriving at her own funeral. The ceremony began precisely at 10:15. I sat in the far left section, beside a dozing elderly woman and a little boy scribbling across the program. Speakers came and went, professors, deans, and then my father, Dennis Harper, was introduced. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted his tie, and took a breath like he was about to announce a campaign. "Today," he began, "we honor the remarkable achievements of our eldest daughter, Olivia Harper, a journey of dedication, brilliance, and inspiration." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked. Olivia bowed her head modestly. I kept my eyes on the stage. "This also marks a pivotal moment for our family," he continued, lowering his voice slightly. "A shift in values and direction. From this day forward, we will no longer align ourselves with those who do not reflect the ideals of our family. This includes Athena." No explanation, no tears, not even a dramatic pause. Just a few coughs, shuffling chairs, and a hush so thick it felt like someone had sliced through the celebration with a blade. I didn't stand, didn't speak. I sat motionless, hands on my lap, hyper-aware of every pulse thumping against my temples. Olivia said nothing. A woman behind me leaned to whisper, "Did he really just say that? Seriously, who does that at a graduation?" I turned away, jaw clenched. The speech rolled on, something about investments, the future, and pruning rotting roots. I stopped hearing the words. I left the graduation ceremony as if I had just stepped off a stage that never had a role for me. Walking past groups of laughing, picture-taking families, I felt like nothing more than a faded shadow drifting through celebration. The name tag labeled guest was still clipped to my chest, cold and quiet, like a confirmation that I had never truly belonged in the frame of the family they built. I wandered down Nassau Street, passing lively cafes and graduation lunches, each step taking me farther from the glowing image of Olivia in her honors robe. When the sun dipped westward, I finally returned to my small apartment in Jersey City. The space was unremarkable, just four beige walls, an old bookshelf, and the armchair I'd had since my freshman year. But at least here, no one could cut me out. I set down my bag, unclipped the name tag, and tossed it into the trash. But as I sank into the chair, a familiar memory crept in. The day I turned 16, and how I'd already learned what it meant to be invisible. That day, I came home early from school, excited because Mom had promised a small surprise. But when I walked through the front door, what I saw was a birthday party for Olivia. Everything was themed Disney princesses, from the Elsa cake to the glittery blue dress. Olivia had just turned 13. I was 16, standing there in the doorway with a small gift I'd bought using money from my part-time job at the bookstore. No one even realized it was my birthday, too. I said nothing. Didn't cry. I just stepped back, closed the door quietly, and sat alone in my upstairs room, listening to the upbeat music and Mom's voice echoing through the floorboards. "Everyone look at Olivia, she's a real little star." I glanced at the family photo in the frame near my window, the one taken that spring on our front porch. I remembered where I had stood, wearing a red dress Mom had called a bit too much, but whatever. But in the version on the wall, I wasn't there. The photo had been cropped just enough to erase me entirely from that memory. That kind of erasure didn't stop at one picture. The year I earned a scholarship to a summer program at MIT, Mom told me you should give that spot to someone who needs it more. Olivia, who was in 9th grade at the time, was already booked for a pre-college experience at a Stanford camp with a tuition of nearly $4,000. No one mentioned me at the family dinner that night. No one asked how I felt walking away from a chance that could have changed my college path. During the holiday season, when I turned 21, I received a Christmas card from relatives on Mom's side. The card showed the Harper family standing beside a tree. Mom, Dad, Olivia, and their dog. I wasn't in it. When I asked, Mom said, "Oh, that one was for major donors, so we used a clean image for branding. Don't overthink it." I tried to stay patient. Tried to convince myself it was all just misunderstanding, careless moments. But when those moments happened, year after year, at every occasion, I had to ask myself, was I ever really seen as their daughter? Or just an oversight they hadn't deleted from the family record? 2 years ago, when Olivia was honored at a charity fundraiser on the Upper East Side, I made the effort to show up and congratulate her. I wore the cream-colored dress Mom once said suited my complexion. At the reception table, a young woman scanned the guest list and looked up apologetically. "I'm sorry, only those on the list can enter the main area." I stepped back, hiding behind a long curtain, watching as Mom beamed next to Olivia on stage. They accepted flowers, took photos, raised champagne glasses. In her speech, Mom said, "I've always been proud to raise a daughter like Olivia, resilient, driven, and the future of the Harper family. Not a single mention of me, not a glance in my direction." That night, I took the late train back to Jersey. My phone vibrated. Dad had texted, "Don't be upset with Mom. You know how particular she is about image. We'll catch up another time." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally beginning to understand. I was never the image they wanted to show the world. I woke up at 3 a.m., cold sweat clinging to my back, even though the air conditioning was still on. It wasn't a nightmare that stirred me. It was something deeper, a dull, pressing ache in my chest. That kind of intuition you can't explain, like something had been quietly stolen from you, systematically, and the cracks were only now beginning to show. I poured a glass of water and sat down at my desk, powering up the old laptop I hadn't touched in months. It took nearly 5 minutes to boot up, casting a soft blue glow onto the ceiling, like a night shift office scene from a documentary. I logged into an old work email, the one I used when I was still a contractor for the Harper Philanthropic Trust, the family foundation my mother had built. Most people assumed I'd left 2 years ago due to some internal differences. In truth, they stopped assigning me tasks, stopped replying to my messages, and quietly revoked my access. Except they forgot one thing. I was the one who set up the internal storage system for the trust, and they never removed the secondary admin access. I opened folders one by one. Harmless sounding names like archived Q3 docs, internal meeting notes, and irregular ops expenses. But then I saw one that made my hand freeze. Holdings underscore retained underscore pending. The first file was titled transfer auth underscore Greenville cabin underscore final PF. I clicked. The first line read, property transfer authorization, Greenville cabin, the small log cabin by Lake Atwood in Maine. The only property my father had ever referred to as something for both my daughters. I remember him saying in front of a lawyer and my Aunt May that it would be split 50-50 between Olivia and me, but the next lines made my blood run cold. Previous co-owner, Athena Harper. Transferor, Athena Harper. Sole transferee, Olivia Harper. Below that was a signature, my name in steady ink. Almost convincing, if it weren't for one detail. I'd never wrote the capital H in Harper with a harsh, straight stroke. I always used a looping curve. I dug out my apartment lease from the file drawer and held it side by side. A clear mismatch. This was forgery. I scrolled to the final page. Notary Public, Emily Raymond, a relative on my mother's side, currently a junior legal clerk at the foundation's law firm. Once again, they hadn't hidden what they'd done. They just assumed I'd never dare to look. I leaned back in the chair, my heart racing. This wasn't just exclusion from a graduation ceremony, not just erasure from family photos. They had, quite literally, erased me from the only asset my father ever left me. No speculation needed. I already knew. That cabin had been used by Olivia as collateral to open her first boutique in Soho last year. My mother had proudly posted about her daughter's visionary investment sense, never once mentioning where the seed capital came from. I closed the document, opened Google Drive, and uploaded all the files to a private folder. Then I backed them up on an external hard drive. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This was legal. I picked up my phone, hesitated, then dialed the one person in my family who had ever told me the truth. Aunt May, my father's younger sister. Athena? Her voice was still raspy, like when she used to read bedtime stories to me. Is everything okay, sweetheart? Did you know about the Greenville cabin? Silence. They told me it was temporary paperwork to make title transfers easier later, she finally said. That's what your mom told me. You believe them? I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then came a tired sigh. I was wrong, wasn't I? I didn't need her to say more. She knew. She had seen and heard more than she'd admitted, but like many others, she stayed silent, thinking I'd be just fine. They had used the kindness of those who loved me as their cover. I ended the call. Dawn was breaking. I pulled open the curtains and looked out onto the quiet street, like nothing had been stolen from me in the middle of the night. I turned back to my desk, reopened the files, and began making a list. Properties under the trust's name, transfers in the past 2 years, and every notary who had signed off internally. I started with the smallest details, those seemingly harmless things they never imagined anyone would revisit. Under the dim yellow light of my desk lamp, I opened each folder within the Harper Philanthropic Trust's storage system. I had once organized these files, set the access permissions, and encrypted the security protocols out of habit. Now, everything unfolded before me, almost like I'd planned this reckoning years ago without knowing when I'd need it. I downloaded over 600 documents, internal meeting minutes, bank statements, fund transfer logs, audit reports, and even personal correspondence between my mother and financial partners. With every download, I immediately backed them up to 2 external drives and encrypted them under new private passwords. Not a single file was left with a trace of access. They couldn't know what I was doing, at least not yet. By day, I worked my regular 8-hour shift at the architecture firm where I managed project finances. By night, I became an investigator in my own life. I set a daily alarm for 2 a.m., the hour when internal email systems run their backups and no one notices unusual data activity. By the end of the first week, I discovered that my mother had approved over $600,000 from the Community Development Fund to an unnamed organization. When I tracked the EIN number, I found it belonged to a limited liability company called MA Consulting LLC. The registered agent, Olivia Harper. In the second week, I found a draft of an internal asset allocation proposal. Though not yet public, the content was clear. 94% of the trust's real estate assets would be moved into a legacy trust under the Olivia branch, contingent on unified brand identity representation for the Harper family. I printed everything, numbered every page, and sorted them into categories: assets, transfers, conflicts of interest, evidence of fraud. I also quietly purchased a pen-shaped voice recorder. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no remote interference. I brought it with me to the quarterly fundraising meeting in Boston, a place where my mother and her trusted advisors often held off-the-record strategic discussions. I sat 3 tables away, pretending to jot down notes while the pen recorded everything. We don't need to include Athena in the legacy plan. She doesn't fit the brand. People will look at Olivia and see the rightful heir. Athena nitpicks the line items. She doesn't understand the big picture. My mother's voice was crystal clear. She didn't need to whisper. She believed I would never have the strength to fight back. In her mind, I was still that girl left off the Christmas card. Silent, patient, invisible. By the third week, I reached out to an old contact, Lucas Tran, a former accountant for the Harper Foundation, now working as an independent financial advisor. We had worked together briefly before he left the trust. He knew exactly where their accounting systems had convenient blind spots. I met Lucas at a riverside cafe in Hoboken, carrying printed copies of the statements. "Athena," he said after flipping through a few pages, "this isn't oversight. This is a systematic siphoning model." I nodded. "I need confirmation. I need to know if this is enough to go to a lawyer." He looked at me, his expression shifting from sympathy to warning. "Are you sure you want to take this all the way? Once you file, there's no going back." "I'm not here to reclaim a name," I said quietly. "I'm here to end a system of abuse I was once a victim of." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then start with the lake house. Prove your original ownership, the rest will follow." That night, I returned home, opened the bookshelf, and pulled out the photo album my father had kept. Inside was a picture of me painting the front porch of the cabin in the summer of 2015. On the back, he'd written, "Athena, the only one willing to pick up a paintbrush." Olivia still on her iPad. Sometimes, evidence isn't in the numbers, it's in the memories. They can't erase that. I looked up at my reflection in the window, thinner than before, sharper, and more awake than I had ever been. I walked into the 3-story glass building of the Harper Philanthropic Trust on a gray Thursday morning. The lobby was still familiar, white orchids at the front desk, a faint scent of freshly polished oak in the air. This had once been my mother's kingdom. Veronica Harper, founder, president, untouchable icon, but I wasn't here as her daughter. I was here as living proof of the truth they had tried to bury. The young receptionist, likely an intern, looked up with a polite but cautious expression. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm sure Veronica will want to see me immediately." I didn't need to threaten. The name Athena Harper carried its own tension. Moments later, the frosted glass door at the end of the hall opened. My mother's personal assistant, Julia, stepped out, her expression barely hiding her irritation. "Ms. Harper, Veronica is in a meeting. I'm not sure." "Julia," I cut in, locking eyes with her, "you do know I once sat in the exact chair you're sitting in now, right? So let me ask again, does she want to handle this herself, or should I walk straight to the attorney's office?" Julia hesitated for a second, then nodded slightly. "Please, go ahead." I stepped into the office where my mother and I used to work every Monday morning. Nothing had changed. The glossy ebony desk, pale leather chairs, framed photos along the walls of Olivia shaking hands with officials, receiving awards, speaking at events. Not one photo of me. My mother looked up from her laptop as if I'd only been away for a few days. Athena, she smiled faintly, her voice composed. You finally came. I'm not here for pleasantries, Mom. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. We need to talk about the cabin at Atwood, about the misappropriated trust funds, about the signatures you know weren't mine. She didn't react, just let out a slow exhale. Athena, if you're feeling hurt, I'm sorry, but every decision has been made to protect the collective image. The family, the foundation, the public. They all need cohesion. No, Mom, this isn't about feelings. It's about legality, about ethics, and if you think you can still control me with carefully worded excuses, you've misjudged me. She raised an eyebrow and slowly stood. You're still the same. Idealizing everything, always wanting black and white answers, even though life doesn't work that way. Black or white depends on behavior, not lighting, Mom. And don't talk to me about ideals. Not when you once made me write the keynote speech for that fundraiser gala, then cut me from the speakers list last minute because I didn't match the tone. Because you dressed like an MIT student who walked into the wrong room, she snapped, for the first time raising her voice. You don't understand that not every role fits the stage. You think being smart is all it takes? I let out a dry laugh. No. I think being decent should be enough. But clearly, to you, decency means nothing, if it doesn't make it on camera. We stared at each other for a long beat, a standoff of unspoken history. Finally, she stepped back and crossed her arms. So what do you want? Not a seat at the family table, not pity. I want transparency. I want the cabin returned per Dad's original will. I want the foundation audited by an independent firm. And I want you to stop using the Harper family brand to shield your misconduct. She didn't answer immediately. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if restraining something, then opened them again, her gaze softening, but falsely. You're still my daughter, Athena. I never wanted you to become the enemy of your own family. Really? I leaned forward. Because you've been erasing me for the last 10 years. But I'm still here. Still breathing, still remembering every time I was cut out. And I'm not staying silent anymore. I placed a thick envelope on the desk. Inside were copies of the cabin transfer documents, audio recordings of the meeting, bank statements, and Olivia's shell company filings. This is the copy. The originals are with my lawyer. You have 3 days. Either you handle this internally or be ready for a state-level audit. She opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. Her hand trembled slightly. For the first time, I saw real unease in her eyes, not the poised, untouchable woman featured on Forbes covers. I turned and walked out, my hand tightening around my bag strap, shoulders squared. In the hallway, Julia avoided eye contact as I passed. As the office door shut behind me, I heard the chair creak, papers hit the desk, and a sharp breath escape. The final mask had started to crack. 3 days passed after that confrontation at the trust. No calls, no emails, no apology. Just a heavy silence, not because they didn't know what to do, but because they still thought I was bluffing. They believed I'd cave, just like when they forced me to withdraw from that scholarship nomination so Olivia could shine alone. But this time, I wasn't turning back. That night, I sat by the apartment window, the New Jersey nightfall draped like velvet. On the table was a silver USB drive wrapped in an envelope marked "Confidential for Legal Review." I checked it one last time. Audio files from the internal meeting, images of the forged signature, foundation withdrawal records with no justification, and the cabin transfer deed for Atwood. Everything was cataloged and numbered like a criminal investigation case file. I sent that copy to Eric Donovan, a civil attorney specializing in estate disputes and nonprofit financial violations. We had spoken weeks earlier, but tonight, things officially began. At the same time, I opened another browser tab, the Ledger, an independent magazine known for exposing financial scandals among family-run foundations and major East Coast fundraising institutions. A former colleague had once introduced me to one of their editors, Marcia Gilmore. I didn't send an anonymous tip. I signed my full name, attached a summary of the document origins, and explained why I was coming forward. I didn't ask for anonymity. I didn't need a victim role. I just wanted the truth in daylight. 2 days later, Marcia replied, "We've already verified some preliminary details. This story belongs on the cover." The following Monday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Not from family, from friends, old coworkers, even people I hadn't spoken to since college. The article went live at 8 a.m. on the Ledger's homepage, headlined, "The Dark Side of a Philanthropic Legacy. Allegations Surrounding the Harper Philanthropic Trust." The subheadline was even sharper. "Forged signatures, funds redirected to a daughter's company, and decades of quiet discrimination." They didn't name me explicitly, but the internal audio clips were quoted word for word. "We're not including Athena in the branding strategy. She doesn't align with the image we're selling. Olivia is the Harper face. Veronica Harper." Another quote, "Athena's too rigid, she reads everything. Be careful with old files. Dennis Harper." I nearly choked when I saw the caption beneath a photo. "Athena Harper, the silent figure who finally broke the wall." By midday, the fallout had begun. A major donor, Arden Wells Capital, publicly announced a suspension of all cooperation with Harper Trust, pending a full investigation. 2 upcoming gala events were abruptly canceled, no explanation given. The foundation's Facebook page locked down its comment section, but too late. Recent posts flooded with demands for financial transparency. I received an email from a former trust employee. Subject line, "Thank you for speaking up." Another messaged privately, "They once asked me to alter reports so Olivia could get more funding." I didn't reply, not out of coldness, but because there was nothing left to prove. I had spoken, I had shown the evidence, and now the truth was doing the rest. That afternoon, I walked past a cafe in Brooklyn. The wall-mount TV played the local news, a short segment, but enough to stop me in my tracks. A well-known nonprofit faces allegations of fund mismanagement and forged legal documents. The New York State Audit Division has confirmed a preliminary investigation is underway. They didn't need to say the name. Anyone following the headlines knew it was the Harper Trust. That night, I opened my laptop and reread the article. In the comments, someone had written, "This is why family legacies shouldn't be controlled by a single inner circle. Transparency should never be sacrificed for image." I sat still for a long time, no smile, no tears, just the quiet realization that for once, my chest wasn't tight anymore. The courtroom looked nothing like what you see on TV. No grand wooden arches, no dramatic gavel bangs, no spotlight shining down on the witness stand. Just 4 pale walls, rows of oak benches, the soft hum of air conditioning, and a few weary glances from court staff. But for me, this was the final stage. The place where the truth would finally be called by its name. I sat on the plaintiff's side beside attorney Eric Donovan, the man I had entrusted with all the evidence. Across from us were my father, Dennis Harper, staring at the floor, and my mother, Veronica Harper, sitting upright, hands clasped tightly, no longer holding the steel gaze she once wore inside the trust's office. Olivia wasn't present. She had quietly stepped away from all public appearances after the investigation broke. Judge Margaret Sloan, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and steady eyes, opened the hearing in a calm, even voice. "This civil hearing between plaintiff Athena Harper and the Harper Philanthropic Trust is now in session." Eric stood, voice firm and measured. "Your Honor, we request legal recognition of the original will written by Mr. William Harper, the plaintiff's father, which clearly states that ownership of the Atwood Lake cabin is to be split equally between his 2 daughters, Athena and Olivia Harper." He placed a notarized copy of the will on the table. "In addition, we present evidence of forged signatures used to transfer full ownership to one party, as well as documentation of financial misconduct within the Harper Trust." The judge picked up the will, scanning each line. My father stayed silent. My mother gripped her hands tighter. Evidence of signature forgery, the judge asked. Eric nodded and produced two documents. This is the property transfer deed for the Atwood cabin, allegedly signed by Ms. Athena Harper, and this is a rental agreement she signed at the same time, confirmed to be her actual signature. The difference in handwriting has been verified by an independent examiner. We also have audio recordings where the defendants admit to excluding Athena from the family brand image in order to control assets. I clenched my hands beneath the table as the recording played. My mother's voice rang out, cold and deliberate. Athena doesn't fit the image we're building. All transfers need to be handled before she realizes. A brief silence settled over the room. Then the judge spoke, voice sharp and unwavering. Do the defendants have a response? My mother stood, drawing a slow breath. Your Honor, we acknowledge there were oversights in the handling of paperwork, but every action was taken with the intent to preserve stability for the organization and the family. No harm was ever intended toward Athena. Then what was the reason for the forged signature? The judge interrupted. Who authorized the transfer? She fell silent. My father looked up for the first time, his voice trembling. I didn't know they were using her name like that. The judge set her pen down, gaze heavy. The law does not take lightly the forgery of legal documents, especially within charitable organizations that receive public funding. Based on the evidence presented, I hereby order that ownership of the Atwood Lake cabin be reinstated to a joint inheritance between Athena Harper and Olivia Harper, per the original will. All fund allocations from the Harper Trust are to be suspended pending an independent audit. Furthermore, the Trust's financial records will be submitted to the Office of the Attorney General for further investigation of potential fraud. I sat frozen, my heartbeat clear and steady in my chest. It wasn't about winning the case. It was that the system that had always quietly erased me was finally forced to acknowledge me as an undeniable part of the truth. My mother remained standing, pale as paper. She didn't cry, but she couldn't meet my eyes either. My father sat hunched, hands clenched, his shoulders trembling as if he'd just lost something too big to comprehend. The judge ended the session with a single, firm line. This hearing is adjourned. The formal ruling will be issued in writing within 3 days. I stepped out into the midday sun, feeling its warmth on my shoulders like a light coat. Across the street, a photographer aimed his lens at my mother as she exited the courthouse. No one stopped him. And I didn't need to hide my face. I never set out to seek revenge. But justice, when it finally arrives at the right moment, always finds a way to return things to where they belong. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the middle of the wooden cabin by Atwood Lake. A place that once echoed the quiet rejection of my family, now slowly transforming into a completely new kind of home. The walls had been repainted a soft cream, the pine floors polished to a warm glow, and every window opened to a view of tranquil blue water. But the biggest change wasn't the materials, it was the purpose. I didn't sell the house, even when someone offered nearly $1 million to buy it outright. Instead, I used the restored inheritance from cash from my father's estate and my remaining equity in the trust to turn it into the Lantern House, a small haven for young people who'd been abandoned by family or aged out of care, with nowhere to go. The idea didn't come from ambition. It came from nights alone in my Jersey City apartment, reading hundreds of emails from strangers after the article was published. They told me about empty chairs at dinner, holidays spent alone, and dreams quietly erased for not matching family expectations. I realized I wasn't alone in that pain, but if I could stand back up, others deserved that chance too. Lantern House had no flashy sign, no $1 million endowment, no big-name sponsorships, but it had a kitchen that stayed open, bookshelves always stocked with new stories, a quiet study room, and 2 warm bedrooms ready for anyone who hadn't yet found a place to call home. I handwrote each thank you card to our supporters. I spent most of my free time working through the legal steps to have Lantern House recognized as an independent nonprofit, completely separate from the Harper name. No one forced me to drop my last name, but I chose to keep it, not to represent them, but to redefine it in my own terms. One fall afternoon, while sweeping dry leaves off the porch, I spotted a boy, maybe 17, sitting on the steps, clutching a self-written sheet of music. He had come from Boston, aged out of the group care system, and had nowhere else to go. "Do you have room for me?" he asked softly. "If you can play that old piano in the lounge," I said, smiling as he laughed. I didn't need awards or my name announced at fundraisers. I needed moments like that, when a young person had the courage to knock and knew someone would open the door. Olivia never reached out again. My parents remained caught in the whirl of audits and restructuring, their charity luncheons growing less frequent. I never waited for an apology. I didn't need acknowledgement, because what I reclaimed was never in their hands. One day, I received a parcel with no return address. Inside was a small cream envelope, the handwriting unmistakable. My mother's. It held a single line. "Maybe you were right." I folded the letter and placed it in a wooden box, next to the guest badge I once wore at my own graduation ceremony, the one I had pulled from the trash while cleaning out my old apartment. I kept them not to hold on to the pain, but to remember that I had moved through it. One late winter afternoon, while the kids roasted marshmallows around the fire pit, a 12-year-old girl slipped a folded note into my hand. I opened it to find a message scrawled in thick marker. "Miss Athena is the first person who didn't look at me like I was a mistake." I couldn't hold back my tears, not from sadness, but from a joy so real, so simple. I pinned the note to the kitchen bulletin board, right next to the motto I had written for Lantern House. "You don't have to be perfect to stay." They once tried to erase me from the family picture, but I never needed the picture. I've written my own legacy. Athena's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we love the most. But instead of letting the past consume her, she turned pain into purpose, transforming a place once tied to rejection into a sanctuary for others. In real life, not everyone gets an apology, but everyone deserves the chance to write their next chapter with kindness, strength, and unwavering resolve. Silence is no longer weakness, it's a strength we choose. What do you think about Athena's decision? Would you have done things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and surprising family stories.